Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for being here. My name is Cynlagos. Cyn is short for Cynthia, and this is Medium Unlimited, where we get to explore design, photography, and video. So far, we've been exploring a lot of really cool stuff in photography in Adobe Lightroom, but this time we're going to explore Adobe Lightroom on the iPad. And I've really tried to find a way so we can both learn something new on the iPad, because iPad quite literally is something else, and I've always waited for it. I'll tell you, I wanted an iPad for so long, but mostly because of the programs and how they behave within it. So something about it's a little bit more organic, so we'll explore all of those things. So today we're going to explore Lightroom on the iPad, but you're welcome to open up your desktop Lightroom, and some of these tools and techniques we'll be exploring will also be there. All right, jump in the chat. Let me know, where are you joining from? What are you up to? Are you working alongside me? That could be cool. This is going to be a very chill session. I curated a house playlist, and so far it's sounding really good. So we'll see how it goes. All right, so here we go. Let's head on over to our iPad. All right, so we've got, I need for my stuff right here. All right, so there you go. So we're on the iPad. This is gonna be interesting because I think this is the part where I find myself getting lost more often, because the iPad makes everything a little bit more comfortable, more organic. There's a lot of different experiences here versus the desktop. But nevertheless, a lot of the different features here are also available everywhere else. So there are a couple exclusive things that I found, and I'm gonna share those with you because those are really cool. But let's see here. All right, I don't want to compete with my own music. All right, so here we go. Here are some of the images that I have in front of me. These images are absolutely beautiful. There's some outdoor photos that I took the time to just photograph and pay attention, really. I love this because I was trying out my 70-200 lens, and I wanted to see the focus potential of it and the close-up feeling of it, because it does compress all of the background, the midground, and the foreground. So it did a really cool job, honestly. Like, that looks so beautiful. Now, some of these I've already gone ahead and edited, so I can demonstrate some of the editing transformations that we can make here. So for example, if you see this before, it's rather blue, and in fact it had just rained, but it was quite more epic than blue, right? So I wanted to bring back some of that color, still maintaining some of those blue hues that make it feel like nice and romantic. Purple does that too. So you can see some of those here on the shadows as well. All right, so let's pick one that we want to try. Here's another one here. Okay, let me know if the audio is sounding good for y'all. Okay, so let's pick one of these, all right? And let's get started in here. New demo for me, so I'm kind of getting used to the whole workflow on this round. But here's the thing. I've got a quick helper for me, for us. So let's explore what is possible within our masking tools. Okay, so we've got our masking tools available at any point of our workflow. However, I want to challenge myself to try the masking tool from the very beginning. So let's select a photo and try the masking tools as the beginning step of our editing process. So let's see here. We've got a couple photos from the actual slackline session. For those of you who may not know what slackline is, I often refer to it, it's like walking on a tightrope, but with a line that is completely different every single time because it's weaved differently. It's absolutely an awesome sport. And so with my 70-200, it makes sense. I can capture these shots because they're so far away. And some of these, I love this. There was a little bit of framing happening with the plants and the outdoors. Sometimes I love doing that kind of focus in to see the subject a little bit better. So let's pick one of these, right? Let's pick one of these photos and start from scratch. So what I would do, first and foremost, of course, you can see that I've created an edit, but within versions, there's always an opportunity to create as many edits as you want. So I'm gonna go in here and create another version and go and say 2. Now we're gonna go back to original, hit apply, and now we're back to our original. Great, so let's start with our masking tools. So now that I'm in masking, you're gonna notice here in this little circle here with the plus sign, we're gonna see a lot of different options for maskings. So masking is a lot of fun to get started on. Doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you're fixing the color, the lighting, it doesn't really matter. Just start with masking, which means you get to apply those property changes to only the thing that you've selected within your mask. And that's a little bit more detailed than just like an overall global edit, all right? So let's go into this and explore some of these options. We've got select subject, select sky. Ooh, that gives me some ideas and imagination. Right, I've already gone through a round of editing this, but I try to observe it from different angles. So we've got select sky, brush, linear gradients. Okay, so linear gradients and select sky are among my favorites, subject being also awesome. So let's go into linear gradient for a second to see what we can do here. So in linear gradient, you're gonna see that the red is gonna be the area that it's being selected. So that is the visibility of what we'll be showing. You can see here that the white is the visibility and the black is hiding it. So in this area that has been selected, we can do just about anything, right? So we can go in here and change some of these properties. We can change the light properties, the color, the effects, details, and so on. So in this case, I want to change the exposure a little bit. So it kind of starts to look a little bit more solemn and sort of like this frame at the top is not exactly like the frame at the bottom, right? So there's a little bit more of a dynamic color range here. All right, that looks cool to me. Maybe I can add a little color. So what kind of color would feel just natural in here, right? So let's move this around. Use fine adjustments. I don't want to use fine adjustments. There you go. So you can start to see a little bit of that blue tint being added. I don't know if you can see it that well there, but all right. So a lot of these details tend to be very subtle. So let's go into our subject, select subject mask. So then in here, we have the same exact properties like color, effects, details, and optics. So let's see, we go in here and these properties are only gonna go in effect the subject. So you can see here, I'm gonna do an extreme change just so you can see it, but you wanna be subtle, right? You wanna be kind on those changes. But what happens is that they tend to layer on top of each other. So it starts to look really cool. So, okay, we got to go here. You kind of have to have a little bit of a sense of where you want to go. For me, oftentimes is a little bit more definition on the subject, a little less definition on the background if I don't want to call attention to it. If it happens to be an incredible building, a beautiful landmark, then maybe I want it in the scene nonetheless. So, but it's often that's the goal. You just want to define the main subject. And that could very well, in fact, be not a person, but it could be a plant, like an object, as food, you know, depends on what criteria things you're photographing. But yes, so architecture can be your subject matter. All right, so we've got that so far. Now, my favorite part, I get to select color range. So color range is my favorite in this case because it has to do with the outdoors. So a lot of outdoors have such different hues of green. So you're going to have so many different tonalities across the board. So it's interesting to kind of dive into selecting the color of an image. So you can see here as I browse through the scene, I can select any color I want, and that will be populated as red. And if I select the sky here, that's what will be selected. But in this case, I want to use it to select the greens. Okay, so it says here, do I want to refine it? I kind of always do, like just to make it a little bit softer on the edges, and then hit apply. All right, so far so good. Now let's go back to our properties. Under the color range, we can then start to play with the hue. How much blue do we have in green? How much yellow do we have in green? So, of course, this part is a bit subjective, but oftentimes I don't want it to be, it depends. If I want to emote something very, very natural, then maybe I will introduce a little bit of yellow, but not too far off from its original green. So it feels really, really natural. Like you don't have to suspect that this feels different. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That could be a different approach. So a little bit of yellow, not too much, or the plants look like it's autumn and they're dead. So maybe adding a little bit of blue can be a cool definition too. So let me go just zoom in there so you can see what I'm even talking about here, right here. Right, so you see that blue. So this is the original, right? It's not that far off. We just added blue to that green, right? So then let's go here, undo. And then this one, this variation has more yellow in it. Again, still looks natural. It's not too extreme. If this was like a movie, like or something like this, there's so many rooms for creativity here. But when it comes to something that is sport, natural related, I'm kind of reading into the room of the people that I photographed. And those people tend to have more of like a down to earth vibe. And so I try to find a common denominator between how I want to edit it and photograph it and curate it. And then also simultaneously have a sense of like, what is it that I photographed and curated? And how can I pass on some kind of like emotion through my editing about them too? So to me, natural is, I think, a kind of simple ask here. So I love adding more textures. I love adding more definitions. So this one I really like so far. I can always add some shadows. This is where I love going into the luminance range. So again, we're still exploring masks, and that's it. So luminance range has to do with the lighting of your scene. So if I go to the left, it's more black. To the right is more of the brightness of your scene. Okay. You can also select the range of that scene, which is really cool. Let's see. All right. So you can see so many opportunities here for you to explore different styles. And I'm going to select apply on this luminance range. And this way I can affect some of the colors in here based on the areas that have the most luminance, since that's where I created my mask. So I'll go here and I'll start to add some color hues that I feel like will be a good fit to create color range within the scene. So, oops, didn't mean to do that. So now it starts to look a little bit more somber because we made it darker, and it's kind of nice. I like it. So it's just a different expression from what we had, and of course definitely from the original. Okay, so all good here. So I feel like the last step, the last step we're going to take here, now that we've done this is I'm gonna do a little bit of cropping because I can see some people here kind of snucking in, and then we have nothing else. But nevertheless, this is just kind of an odd composition. It's not quite in the center, not quite on the right. So let's do a little bit of cropping. Let's hit done and go to cropping. And in here, we're gonna find something, a ratio that we like. So something like 5:4, 4:5. I'm gonna go by, I always love a 16:9, but I'm gonna go by a 5:4. Nah, 16:9, because you wanna show off the length of, you know, at least at the, and the essence of slacklining, just the length of the line is kind of cool to see. So even though this doesn't even cover it, but I think that rationalizes that decision there. So let's see, I'm gonna make this as long as possible. So I do want him in the rule of thirds. So on those cross points, it's gonna help us guide the eye just about there. That looks good to me. And yeah, that looks good. Okay, so we can actually crop out those the hands that were there visible. So we don't need to even remove them. We just crop them out. So you can see there how it turned out, the before and after. Awesome. So let's find some more iterations of this one. You can see on this one, I added a little bit of blue. So that looks rather different from this one that's fairly warm. All right, let's find another photo to edit, focusing on one technique. So let's see what our technique is going to be this time. All right, so what's technique up next? We've got lens blur. So that's going to tell us a little bit about what to select, right? So lens blur is mostly defined by the fact that you want that, again, definition versus not defined, right? So if your background is blurred, it's going to help whoever's in the foreground be defined. And with lens blur on a post-editing workflow, it can make it for a lot of really cool stuff to happen in the post-editing, even if you didn't get that blur during production. So that is all to say, let's select something that has depth, that needs depth, not that it has depth. For example, if we're selecting this one right here, there you go. If we're selecting this one right here, it wouldn't make sense, but it's absolutely stunning. I love it. It's so beautiful. It's honestly just the lens being able to compress all of this, which is nice. And this one needs no lens blur, but I need an image that needs lens blur. So let's keep looking here. What is an image that would benefit from lens blur? This one's cool. So this is me on the slack line. So the back already has a little bit of blur, but can we add more is the question. So let's see. Let's keep looking here. Ooh, I love the shot. And this here, definitely the back is not as in focus. So I would probably, I mean, the back is more in focus than the other one. So I think this is a good one. We can try out doing lens blur on this image. So the background and the leaves get to have this like nice blur look, and we can see what that option is like and if we want to keep it. So I absolutely love the textures of the trees, but I think that could be a cool option for us. So let's give this one a try. Let's create a version here. Say number 2, go to original, and then now I can edit this photo with original applied. And do we want to edit the original? Yes, I think so. We can edit the edited one. We'll just add the blur. All right, so where's blur, you might ask? Okay, so we don't need the version thing. I'm gonna go to this one. Hit apply, there you go. All right, so we're editing the one that's already color edited. But nevertheless, we're gonna add blur to it. That is the task, right? So here on blur, you get to see here how we get options for the blur amount. We get options for what the type of circle it's gonna be, the kind of bokeh it's gonna be. So we've got circle, we've got bubble, 5-blade, ring, cat eye. I like that, that's cool. So let's zoom in here and see. That's why I'm still in this mode, because I want to see as much as possible. You see the textures of the trees very much, right? What happens when I hit that blur amount to go up? You can see there, all the way up, the bokeh. You can start to see the little circle, right? You can see that there. So let's see what happens when we change it to bubble, right? Very visible, those circles. Really cool. And that's just the bokeh. Now look at what that looks like. Definitely it drew the eye directly to me. However, it's a bit too much, right? But we were doing that just to see the circles. So you definitely want to lessen the blur amount to something more subtle. But let's keep looking at the variations. We got ring, we've got cat eye, and that's what the cat eye looks like. It has a lot of cool drag, which is interesting. And then we've got the ring, which has a lot of texture. So it's a little bit too attention calling, I think. So we're gonna revert back to some of these. I think the eye was cool. I mean, yes, the cat eye was probably my favorite, but we're gonna lessen this to about here. And now this looks a little bit more natural, right? So this is before, this is after. So it has a little bit of bokeh. It has some cool things going on. Yeah, I dig it. Yeah, okay, so I think that was a good job on that one because we found one good candidate for the blur effect. Let's see if we can find another. So again, it has to have some level of depth, right? So this is a good one. We've got foreground, we've got midground, so foreground, sort of. Actually, we mostly have foreground, midground, background. But it's a very flattened image because I use that lens, right? So some of these here, this is a cool one because it's a portrait. So we can try doing blur on this one. You can see it there when you zoom in. You have those little circles forming. You also have the cat eye, which to me, the cat eye tends to have just enough balance between having a little bit of texture and also having that bokeh be mostly blurred and not smudged, right? Because if it's too textureless, I think it tends to feel less natural. So this one's a little bit tricky though, because when I look at this, I notice it's able to define the top area to blur it, but not the bottom as much. So let's make it focus on the subject. So now when we do that, it gives us a range to navigate so that we don't have to be kind of just at the mercy of whether I can select a subject. We can select different properties so you can start to sense, okay, this is landing mostly on my subject. No, it's landing mostly on the background. That looks really wild right there. But you can also select the target right here, and this way you have the opportunity to select maybe that plant over there to the left and so on, and create a different emphasis that way. I'm gonna hit apply. Ooh, I think I needed to lessen that a little bit here. Hit done. And I'm going to do a quick color edit on this one just to improve it from where it's at. Let's do a quick color mix. Select that green. Add some saturation back in. A little bit of luminance. It's like I'm making a recipe of sorts. And then we're going to go into the color grading, which is by far always my favorite part. So you can see here, we've got a couple of wheels. We've got the shadow, we've got the midtones, and we've got ourselves the highlights. Of course, there's always the global that adds color across the board. Look at the difference between global and then doing a color per highlight, midtone, or shadow. So much different, right? So much more different. You're gonna see here right beneath it the luminance, blending, and balance. And I love the luminance. It's like just the right amount of punch, right? So let's go here into the blending. Never skip this step because there's a lot of little just tuning that it does here that I feel like you cannot skip at all. So down here underneath this little carrot, you've got the hues. Oof, now we got there. There you go. So remember we said we want it to look natural. So we don't want like hyper saturation. Like this one actually doesn't look as natural as this one does. So let's go into our subject and try to bring back some color here too. So back to what we learned about our masks. Let's go over to maskings. I think this is the best opportunity to select or allow the AI to select the subject, and I don't have to think about that. So I'm gonna go in here and go into the song. This song just kind of surprised me out of nowhere. All right, so I'm gonna go into the properties and change it to a little bit more color. Here you go, color. So let's add this in. I think this is like my least favorite song. If y'all were at the beginning, you know that I am testing out this soundtrack, this playlist. So let's see here. Okay, so we're bringing back that warmth into our subject and changing and refining the colors. So let's do that. And you can also stack them. So there's several options to continue to edit the subject and just stack those different edits together. The hardest thing is to get the skin. That's by far the hardest. There you go. But at least she has some color now. I think before we had it really desaturated. All right, there you go. And I think if I really want to focus on her color, I can also hit done there and go over here to color and visit the color mixer. And inside, you're going to find the target adjustment tool, one of my favorite tools. And so you're going to go in here. And then we can select the skin. And then from here, we can determine the hue, the saturation, or the luminance. So let's do a little bit more saturation, a little less luminance. I think that's kind of what's missing here. And then we have One last thing I want to add here is a linear gradient. And we're going to just layer that up and then add a color. So this color doesn't actually exist in my image, but I feel like it gives it that really cool film leak effect. So it just adds a little bit of texture. Interesting, right? All right. So lastly, final thing. I'm going to do a quick radial gradient right about here to create just a slight attention to this, to the subject, to the center. And one of the things I can do to achieve that is to just make it a little bit warmer in temperature by a slight bit. Make it just slightly brighter. It's like it's drawing the eye in. So slightly brighter. And you can also invert that. So if you wanted to go in here, hit invert mask. And instead of bringing it up, you bring the highlights down, the exposure down. So you've got sort of this hyper focus. I don't know if you can see hyper focus on the center. So I don't think we're quite done here with the entire details of this, but we got started somewhere really cool. We've got a little bit of blur happening, right? See that blur? We've got some nice colors on the greens. We've got a nice light leak situation there and some nice exposure with a radial. So that's really cool. These have been super fun already to explore. So folks, I just want to say thank you so much for being here live with me. This is always a lot of fun for me to edit live because it helps me process a lot of what I do on a regular basis. And this is a series where I explore Lightroom on the iPad and any app that is available on the iPad, which has drawn my curiosity as of late. So I welcome you to try out some of these techniques that you learned here today. So a lot of masking, lens blur, they still work across the board on your desktop on Adobe Lightroom. So this was a chill session. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you dealt with the soundtrack. I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to keep it. But again, my name is Cynlagos, and thank y'all for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.